And I realized that there is so much manual work happening here. Everyone is running around helpful skeleton. People are just cat herding and like doing war rooms and resolving merge conflicts, and no one's sure what is shipped, what has not shipped, etc. And I realized that this is a problem. Things can't work like this.
Hello and welcome to episode 40 of the Metacast podcast. This is Ilya and me talking about our journey in Metacast, setting up the company, and sometimes we have guests in our show. And today we have three folks from Tramline. They'll tell us in a little bit about what they work on. We have Pratul, Nivedita, and Akshay from Tramline today. We're going to hear about their journey. If folks have been listening to our episodes like diligently, then they know that we talked about Tramline a little bit in previous episodes. That's the CI/CD platform that we use. And I know Akshay and Nivedita from quite a few years ago when I worked with them for a few months at a dev agency called Nilenso in Bangalore. So yeah, here we go. Pratul, Akshay, Nivedita, welcome to the show. Do you want to introduce yourselves and Tramline?
Hey, so I'm Akshay. I've known Arnab for quite a few years now. As Arnab mentioned, we worked together for a bit at Nilenso. I think that was 2014, perhaps 15.
And I think recently too, like I just noticed on LinkedIn that you changed your job to Tramline, and I messaged you on like, hey, what's Tramline? And you explained, and I was like, hey, that's exactly what we need right now, because that week I was struggling setting up CI/CD for our app. So that was like another serendipity. So before we get into Tramline, how about you quickly introduce yourselves? Because I don't think we've heard all of you so far.
That's basically it for me. So, I mean, a little far back before I met you, Arnab, we started Nilenso a year before that, 2013. Nivedita, myself, and 4 other folks, I think, originally kicked it off. I think you know most of them. Before that, we also worked for another sort of very specialized Ruby on Rails-ish consultancy that was quite popular back in like a decade ago.
That was, C42 or?
It was called C42, yeah. Yeah, and I found out about those folks through various internet channels like the IRC, which is also where Pratul and I met in 2008. Yeah, that's right. I've basically been programming since and been moving across these different agencies. This is our first foray into doing a product for real.
Like a full-fledged product.
Not a fake sort of, is this a product or this is a hobby project type of situation?
Yeah, it's not a hobby project. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. I met Akshay at Nilenso. Before that, C42. We both joined C42 around similar times, like 6 months apart or something. And after C42 decided to close off its consulting thing, all of us at C42 decided to open Nilenso. That was how Nilenso was created. Basically, I worked and sort of ran Nilenso for the last few years, for about 9 years. Nilenso very recently celebrated its 10th anniversary.
Wow, nice, yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, like back when we started it, we didn't think it would last this long. So, we wanted it to. We didn't think it would. But so we were quite happy of the fact that it has lasted long and it's going strong, actually, to be honest. I'm really happy about that. The reason I said a real product and not like a hobby product is because at Nilenso we tried like a few other products apart from the Kulu thing that Arnab worked on. We tried some wiki thing, some rebranding, Mattermost, I think. We tried like a few other products, which we would treat as if it works out in the next 3 months, we will run this, otherwise we'll kill it. So that was sort of like in our minds, hobby product or hobby project.
You all were like big into dog fooding also, I think. Like everything that you built, you would use it internally and see if you'd like it or not. So that's a good way of developing things, yeah.
So Tramline is all of our first attempt into building a product as a business.
Actually, second for me. I should count pause.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear from Pratul also. Yeah, you're the only person I don't think I've worked with, right?
That's true, yeah, because I was not at Nilenso, although Nilenso's timeline and my timeline intersects so many times. Oh yeah, quickly, hey everyone, I'm Pratul. Between the three of us, between Akshay, Nivedita and me, I'm the one who actually built a lot of mobile first stuff and built a lot of apps. I've been building Android applications in production since, I think the first one was in 2010. which was very, very early. Practically nobody had seen an Android phone. Because I remember for the longest time, a lot of people would ask me what phone I have because they'd never seen Android. And before that, I used to do a bunch of PHP, and I used to do a bunch of open source work for Drupal, the content management platform. I did Summer of Code with Drupal, which is around the same timeline that Akshay and I met online on IRC through Summer of Code, right? I think it was a Summer of Code channel.
That's right, yeah. I mean, we had a shared interest because I was working at GNOME and you were working for Drupal, I think, yeah.
So, for people who are not familiar with this, what is Summer of Code?
So Summer of Code is this really fun and probably one of my favorite things that Google has ever done, which is a program for university students. So you have to be a student at a university, not in high school, where they get to work on an open source project, like a specific part of an open source product, and Google pays them for it. So I think the timeline is something like 3 months. I think it's like the program is 10 or 12 weeks long, and you get paid. I actually have no idea how much money they get paid today, but in 2009, which is when I did Summer of Code, which now sounds like a lifetime ago, I think I got paid $4,500, if I remember correctly.
Something that order, yeah. I think they have regional pricing now.
Was it 4,500 for the whole summer or per month?
No, for the whole summer.
It's probably still going on, but in the beginning it was very hard to get into also, right? Like you would apply for it and then Google will go through like a selection process and all that. Yeah.
And I distinctly remember this particular year because the year that I did Summer of Code in 2009, I think is the first time they selected 100 students from India. India was the second largest country in that year after the US, and it was 100 students, which is quite a big deal because they didn't expect so many people from India to show up. It was very, very nice. The program was really nice. My experience was great. It was very formative for me. And I'm still friends with pretty much everyone who I met at that point. And this whole lot of people have gone on to do all sorts of crazy things.
How old were you when you did this?
20? 19, 20?
So basically like you were still a student? Cool.
And I remember, so these connections that you all created, because when I was working with you all at Nilenso, there were a lot of other Summer of Code participants who showed up there. And these are like the best programmers in that university year. So you were getting the like cream of cream to show up for Nilenso at that time.
Yeah. I remember at Nilenso at least, obviously worked a little bit differently, but at Nilenso...
Wait, what's obvious?
Sorry, Obvious is the company that Pratul co-founded and worked at.
Let me close out my chapter. Yeah. Basically, I ended up moving to Bangalore from Delhi and starting my career as an Android engineer in 2011, September 2011. And I worked on the very first app for this now very large medical software company called Practo. And I built their first app. I was one of the very early engineers there. And that was a fun experience, but I was very, very young. And so were the founders. I think the founders are only, a year and a half older than me. I was 22, so they were 24. But you know what happens when you throw in a bunch of 22 and 24-year-olds together and you ask them to build a business. So it was fun for a while. And then I realized that, hey, I don't want to do this. I want to do something else. I want to do something of my own. And basically after that, I never did a job. I only did consulting. I only did freelancing after that. And me and a very close friend from school who I knew back in Delhi, both of us were in Bangalore and we did a freelance thing for a bit. We built a bunch of things and we also tried our hand at building a bunch of products actually. We built a game, we built a word game, we built a competitor to Goodreads back then, and a bunch of fun stuff. And we were kind of running out of money very quickly. And I got a chance, I think a bunch of people on Twitter were looking for an Android engineer. But rather, my former co-founder at Obvious, Rahul Gonsalves, Rahul was looking for an Android engineer, and a bunch of people said, hey, if you're in Bangalore, you should talk to Pratul. So a bunch of different people tell him about me, and he's like, who is this guy again? So Rahul and I end up working on one of the earliest apps at Flipkart that Flipkart ever built. In fact, this was years before they built their retail app. And it was an ebooks platform and an MP3 streaming platform. That's what we worked on. It was called Flyte, Flyte. And that was fun. The most fun thing that came out of it is that Rahul and I became pretty close friends, and we decided, hey, you know what, we should do this consulting thing together. We shouldn't do this separately. And that's how Obvious happened. It wasn't initially called Obvious, it was initially called Uncommon. But we started Uncommon in Bangalore around the same time that Nilanso started, and we all knew each other, all of us pretty much. It was a very small community, and the next 9-10 years overlapped a lot for us because we'd like throw each other leads all the time. We've worked on a bunch of projects together. It helped that we weren't competing with each other. I think now that I look back, I think, yeah, because Nilanso specialized in doing backend services and like all this fun stuff on the backend. And what Obvious specialized in was actually front end stuff. So we were doing design and apps or building apps. And so it was a good compliment to each other because every time someone asked us that, hey, do you guys know someone who can build this API for us? I'd be like, yeah, we know the best people. You should talk to these guys.
Yeah. It lent itself well to being paired up together as well.
So how did you all decide to start Tramline? Is it like after 13 years of building Android apps, you finally got tired of automating the release process?
That's not very far off from the truth, actually. That is so the story of Tramline. It's funny because I have been mulling Tramline or something like Tramline in some shape or form for many years now. Many years before Tramline even started, actually, and before I even moved out of Obvious. And Nilanso was the first people who I came and spoke to. And this was in 2018. So in 2018, at Obvious, we were consulting for Ola Cabs. And Ola Cabs and Uber at that point were fighting pretty hard. And so Ola got us in, me and a couple of my colleagues. We went in and we worked on performance stuff for their driver platform. So their driver, the app that their drivers use, that was obviously running Android. And that platform was running Android and was built on top of Android. So we did a bunch of work for them, and I didn't actually write much code there because I had a couple of folks on my team at that point who were just doing this way faster than I was. And I was one of the senior most engineers on the team who had that kind of experience. And so my job became looking at the operational stuff of the team. And so this was a large team. This was a team of 20 engineers that was shipping one of the most used Android platforms daily in India. And I realized that there is so much manual work happening here. Everyone is running around helpful skeleton. People are just cat herding and like doing war rooms and resolving merge conflicts, and no one's sure what is shipped, what has not shipped, etc. And I realized that this is a problem. Things can't work like this. So I tried to help them out without building anything, just as a process to kind of like, streamline their project management, streamline their Jira, streamline their, merges and branching strategies and stuff. Kind of help them with that. I actually did training on Git and branches and stuff for them. But that was this first spark where I realized that this is a problem. I think that I spent the next year, by the time I came to Nilanso, I spent a year looking up who has done something like this. And I discovered Facebook, in typical Facebook style, had written a research paper, very accurately titled Continuous Delivery of Mobile Applications at Facebook. It's very straightforward. And it's a 16-page long paper, still available on the internet. Very, very well written, very well researched. It has folks like Kent Beck. I think Kent Beck is one of the authors on the paper. And they talk about how they built this collection of tools and how they took the idea of a release train and how they took that built tooling around their project management system and their CI and their code to ship continuously or as continuously as they could. Because Facebook was one of the first very, very large apps on the iPhone, right? It shipped on the first iPhone, right? And then it has always been one of the largest apps in the world. They ran into this problem before anyone else did, which was that all the learnings that they had for continuous deployment on their backend and front-end teams, which are also super large scale, they all fell flat. They all went away because the App Store or the Play Store just don't allow that anymore. So this is a very useful paper, and that paper was a landmark in my mind, I remember, because I read it multiple times. I printed it out, I highlighted it, and I was like, this is it. This has to exist somewhere. And I don't know what I did after that. I remember I did a whole bunch of like very high level thinking that this should happen, that should happen. I took it to Nilanso that, hey guys, we should build this huge thing. I remember that thing was so huge. It was so
It was a 4-part vision. It was a multi-year vision into what he wanted this product to be.
Yeah, and that was what I thought was version 1.
So you went to Nilanso with this, and did Nilanso not decide to work on it? How did you all fork out
Pretty much. I remember the scenes after. There was a general disinterest, let me put it that way. And I think a lot of the reason was not just because it was perhaps too bloated, but also because I think none of us had really closely worked in the mobile space that much. And none of the Nilanso folks. I mean, we'd played around with the closure script, React natives and what have you. but not really released at large scale. Maybe those teams were probably like 4 or 5 folks at max. So it didn't really hit us. I think if I remember correctly, it had a lot to do with a whole bunch of other stuff that hopefully Tramline will incorporate in the future, but not enough to do with releases per se. And that time, I think most of the other stuff like the feature flaggings and the observabilities of the world were things that the backend folks were just using. It was just a normalcy, right? Like the sentries, the Datadogs.
There was also like a lack of empathy that all of us at Nelenso would have around this, right? Like backend folks, they're like, this thing is simple. Why aren't you just using the standards that exist already? Why are you worrying? Why are you trying to recreate the wheel in some ways? That was the initial reaction a backend team would have to this.
And I think that I can totally understand that. I think before starting with the mobile app building thing, because you do all of these things in the backend, you're flexible because you can deploy like smaller microservices independently and all that. It all works very seamlessly, I'd say. Whereas I think when I started building the iOS app and the Android app, if you just follow like their App Store guidelines or Android Play Store, independently you can make it work. But just getting everything to work in a automated like build and deploy, especially from one setup code base, because we use Flutter, right? We kind of build both apps from the same code base. That was insane. So I think I'm glad that something like that exists. Who are some of the like incumbents in this space? There's Bitrise, there's a few other places, right?
So Arnav, before we go there, actually, can we take a step back and maybe talk a bit about the customer problem here? What is the world without Tramline?
Right. So the world without Tramline is effectively a part of your engineering team doing a bunch of coordination work and a bunch of hand-holding across teams, because you can't move fast enough, because you can't release fast enough on the app stores.
So how do you release? What is the process if you don't use a tool like this?
I mean, there are scripts to deploy stuff. That's there. There are tools that will dump a build into TestFlight, which...
Fastlane.
Yeah, Fastlane, for example, very popular open source project, is really the star for open source stuff in mobile specifically, actually for around mobile apps. So there are things like that, but they're scripts. And unfortunately, they cover a part of the release cycle. And the problem comes into play when you're an organization that is trying to ship a product that you cannot ship fast enough, and therefore you're artificially slowing down your release cycles. Now, if you're artificially slowing down your release cycles, the more you slow it down, the more people stress. So there is only a couple of times in a month where a mobile-first business is actually shipping an app. And therefore, everyone else in the app is now worried about those 2-3 days, because they know, me as a product manager or me as an engineering manager where my team might be working on a feature, I know that if I don't finish this and I don't get it merged by, say, 11th of October, I will have to wait till 21st of October now, because it'll take us 10 days to slowly roll out the build, ensure that it's stable and like it goes to 100% and we've monitored the users and crashes are fine, etc., etc. Right? Because things are slow. And things are slow because apps are a lot like on-premise software. Like apps get downloaded to our personal devices or our tablets and our phones, and the developers don't have any control about what happens to those apps once they're in the consumer's phone. So you can choose to never update the app. You can choose to cancel the update. You can choose to not open the app entirely, etc. So it's a lot more complexity, and that complexity is much more similar to on-premise software than it is to actually backend software, backend services, or say web frontends, that matter.
And Ilya, let me try to also add a bit of color from my perspective. When you say it's a script, let's say you have a team of like 15 developers and you're building an iOS app or an Android app, or likely both at the same time. These scripts, you have to make them work exactly, like fine-tune it for your app, but also somebody has to be in charge of coordinating all these releases, right? Because there's 15 people contributing code. You have to figure out which kind of feature is ready to go. Does it need to have feature toggling and all that stuff? And somebody needs to manually run those scripts. And you need to ensure that they're doing it correctly. And that's what I think all this process automation and tooling helps with. Is you take all of that out of like these 15 people, there's no need to coordinate anymore. You just, when you're ready, you ship your changes to, or you get your changes reviewed, merge it into a branch, and then Tramline will take it from there and figure out how to deploy it.
A good analogy that I think we often like to use, it's a run book of your perhaps manual release process, perhaps script-based process, but either way, it's a run book that always executes the same way every single time you run it. And one of the cool things that have just emerged, perhaps Arnav and yourself have seen it also now, because all this work is happening on Tramline. When Arnav triggers something, or Ilya, you trigger something, we have a full audit log of every single thing that a person did that pertains to a release. That is all captured as a part of release data. If you made a faulty decision, perhaps, or a decision that was unwanted,
It lives on forever now. Thanks.
yeah, it lives on. It's
Tramline blame.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm reading the Elon Musk book right now by Walter Isaacson. So he says there that Musk, he mandates that next to every single thing that's being done, whatever, like a part specification or a release, like for that matter, there would be a name, so that there is someone to blame when things go wrong.
That's very musky.
That's one usage of it. Another use of it would be to learn. Like, okay, this was the mistake we did. We can learn from it and not do the same mistake in the next release.
But just the visibility, right? Like if you're running it using a script, let's say from my machine, you have no idea who ran the last release, who deployed it to Android. And if you have a question, you don't know who to go to ask.
Yeah.
And on top of that, once the app is built, you don't know what commits got into it, what commits did not get into it. So somebody has to sit around and document all this. Might as well be a process and a tool around it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a binary, right? We don't have the same sort of visibility because in backend, usually just like small chunks of work go, so perhaps like 2 or 3 weeks of work going together. And there are times actually where releases run in parallel. Like if you going back to Pratul's Facebook paper that he mentioned, most releases, they actually run in parallel in big teams, where if a release has gone past the testing mode and is currently in sort of a release mode, they're released slowly, of course. There is another release already which has gone into testing mode while the upcoming release is in release mode. So there can be sometimes up to 3 releases which are getting prepared simultaneously. So you don't have to just remember what's going on in this release. You have to remember, or you have to know what is going on in all the 3 parallel releases that are getting prepped. And in most companies that we have talked to, there is usually 1 or 2 people who are like, I know exactly what to do in this release. If those people go away, the rest of the team has no idea. They're like, I don't know how to release this app anymore. These are the 2 or 3 people who were responsible for it. So the buzz factor is just really, really low in most mobile teams. So Tramline plans to eliminate that. We have codified your release. This is like, as Akshay said, this is a run book. This is exactly the steps you need to follow to make this release. And even if the person responsible or the person who knows it by heart is no longer there, anyone can take the run book and just run with it.
See, like if I'm not there, Ilya can run it now.
Yeah, because there's one button to click. It's guardrails, you know.
We don't even have a button to click anymore, because that's what I was telling Akshay, that I don't want buttons to click. I want it to go out automatically on every night, which is great.
There's a useful addendum here that is probably worth calling out. It isn't to say that this stuff doesn't happen on the back end. That would be unfair, because the designers and the compliance folks, the regulatory stuff, all the stuff that slows a release down is still there. That's not changing. The important distinction here to make, I think, is the abstraction that you're working with in terms of the deployment of the software artifact is entirely different. I think that's where the stakeholders who are a part of this process, they have a sense of there's sort of more scrutiny there, because on the web world, even though these folks are participating in this release process, the scrutiny is much less because A, you can deploy more frequently. So the unit of work is much smaller. And B, you can take it back if something goes wrong. Obviously, you don't want to keep rolling back also on the back end. That's a terrible waste of time. So you should still avoid doing that. But you have the optionality to do so is still there, which is why the process, although not entirely distinct from the other side, is more important on the mobile side.
Yeah, I think like Pratul says, it's very much like you're shipping your code to be run in somebody else's computer, because that is what it is. So it's hard to change after you've shipped it. You don't have any control over what's going to happen to it after.
Yep, it's shooting a football out in the air type of situation, yeah.
So who are the incumbents in this space? What do you do differently?
I think one of the ways that I like to think about this is direct incumbents and indirect, like direct competition and indirect competition. And direct competition is, of course, folks who are building products that overlap in many ways with Tramline. So three examples that come to mind immediately are Microsoft App Center, Bitrise, and Runway. And all of them do things a little bit differently. Some of them prioritize a very wide variety of features. So App Center, for example, is very comprehensive. It has CI pipelines. It has this internal beta build distribution, and it has stuff for React Native folks. It has this over-the-air updates for React Native apps and stuff. Bitrise is just CI/CD. They were one of the first very well done CI platforms that focused on iOS and Android. That's their thing. And Runway, I think, is the closest to what Tramline does in the sense that it is a nice codified release process, which gives you those guardrails that you can use. So there's a point about direct competition. And I think this probably is true for most of the market. Our fight is less towards direct competition and more towards indirect competition. And that is Confluence and Google Sheets and Notion. It's not possible that teams aren't solving this already. So everyone needs a release process. No one just does this ad hoc. If you're even marginally serious about your app, you have a release process. It's just that the first thing that they'll end up doing is just write it in a Google Doc, right? And at some point it gets upgraded because someone's maintaining it. And then at bigger companies, we've seen 5-6 page long Confluence documentation, which is maintained by a whole bunch of people that do this, and this person's responsible for this part, etc., etc. And that is really hard to get rid of because that is lore. It's almost like history. And I've often found in our customer conversations and even in our research which we've done, it was harder for us to convince people to give up their documentation and move to a system that can do the execution. That's an interesting thing to call out, direct and indirect competition.
Why is it hard for them? Like, what stops them?
I think because they're not used to a process at all. They are used to completely manual stuff. So they have bare bones CI pipelines. It'll just make a remote build. Like all they want is a build on a CI on a CI server. But they don't do anything with that. They don't send that. They haven't scripted their pipeline to deposit the build into TestFlight or to Play Store or whatever. So what the pipeline does is it basically compiles the code. And then a person steps in, they download the binary file, send it to Slack or upload it to somewhere. It's very manually driven. It's a person's kind of job to read that runbook and of course maintain that runbook. And they have to remember that this has to be updated because otherwise something will fail.
What tends to happen with manual processes is you start to change things over time. You see like, oh, there's a better way to do this small thing and there's like a different way to do this, and you change those things. And now every company who's doing this ends up with their own customized version of their own workflows. And you don't want to go to a tool because it maybe doesn't do 5 of the 25 things that you want to specifically control. This actually goes back to something that I was talking to Akshay maybe a few months back, is how are you thinking about like acquiring customers? Because established companies that have their own like CI/CD, very, very specific, documented, this is what we do step after step, will find it hard to move to something that is streamlined because it might not do a few of the things that they want. Versus maybe smaller places that don't have an established process. They're just looking to like get started. Kind of like Ruby on Rails back when you started. It's very opinionated, but you know exactly what you're getting and you don't have to think about it.
I think one of the ways we think where we can work with this is we ask people, we model the release process in Tramline as you would do it in your company. Tramline is not opinionated in how you should run your release. It's not actually opinionated that way at all. What it is opinionated about is like whatever you do, you need to put that down. You need to put that down as a step in the release process. So that is, I think, where we differ from some of the incumbents as well. We will model your release process, whatever you follow. Because one of the other things is mobile doesn't have standards around this. Mobile teams do not have any kind of conventions or standards around how to run. I mean, I'm not saying any kind. Of course, there are some standards, but everyone has their own way of doing this, which is not true in backend, I've noticed. There is a certain amount of the DevOps sort of guidelines that exist. Yeah, there are types of deployments. You can do canary, you can do blue, green and all that. But like how to get to that is very straightforward. It's very standard.
So if you actually go back maybe 8 to 10 years, there was a whole type of role called release engineers and release management. And so you would have your dev team who is building it. There's a support team, there's a DevOps team, and then there's a release team. All they do is figure out like what branches to merge, how to merge them, resolve the conflicts, and go through these steps. And that today, that's gone, right? Like that role doesn't exist pretty much, except for maybe some very, very older companies who haven't changed their processes because it's all automated now. And that's what you're trying to do for the mobile world, essentially.
I mean, it helps to bear in mind, right, that mobile is very, very new. Like the App Store, 14 years, I think 13 or 14 years is the App Store's age, right? It's very new. And a lot of the very large mobile first companies that people associate, when people think of an app, some of the largest, most successful companies are very, very new. Say Swiggy, Gojek.
Or even like Uber, Facebook, they're not that old compared.
Yeah, Uber is, I think, 2012. I think it's like just over 10 years old. So it's not surprising that the first generation of companies that became very, very large, and we've done our research on this, it's not surprising that the Ubers and the Lyfts, and the Spotify and Shopify and stuff, all of them built tools like Tramline internally. They faced the problem very, very fast. They were hitting huge scale on this app that they were shipping. And now that we're in the second generation, the second decade of the App Store, like it's kind of ridiculous to expect now that the next Uber that happens, or like, the next large scale mobile first business that gets built, they will also have to solve the same problem internally. It's kind of ridiculous, right? It's time to democratize some of those ideas that we've understood that are good ideas.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that none of those companies open sourced something, and then AWS would just pick it up and build a service out of this.
A few of them have, I believe. Shopify's Ship It is open source, and it's sort of written in a plugin based way where you can write your own thing on top of it. You can write your own plugins to make your own process on it. But of course, writing that plugin is expensive. It's non-trivial to do.
Yeah, no one's open sourced their platform. People have open source parts of their tool. People have written about it extensively. Even if they haven't open sourced it, there's a lot of writing. And we have learned a lot from that writing. We've in fact spoken to some of the people who've done that writing and understood what they were thinking and like how things were. We really hunted the internet for some of these videos from like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, with people talking about these things.
In fact, a lot of the UI that you see on Tramline is just directly lifted off of the few screenshots that you can find from the internal tools that these people have built. It's basic.
Some of the stuff we just feel like, yeah, this is great. They already figured this out. Let's just do this.
So talking about open source, you offer Tramline, like it's fully open source also, right? So tell us like what led you to go down that path, how it's working out.
I mean, when Pratul and I were speaking about this originally, which was when we were both in our previous jobs, and when we were speaking about this, I think it was very clear to us that this would have to be open source. There are reasons for it to be open source that make sort of longevity sense. And then there are reasons for it to be open source which are derived from the fact that there is no reason for it to not be. So it's like that kind of lens as well. Of course, the second one is philosophical in nature. You have to buy into it, you have to believe in it. And I'm sure everyone knows the folks that I'm talking about here, sort of the open source evangelists of the world would say this. And I think we roughly fall into those camps as well. There was no reason for Tramline to not be open source in the sense that there was nothing much to lose here. Of course, when you're in such an early stage, you can argue about it. Like, what if like the AWSs of the world come in and take your software and launch a service and all of that? I mean, we would be humbled too if they did so. Please take our software and launch our service if you're watching this. But it isn't really just about that. In a similar way, Fastlane has forever been open source. It makes sense for this kind of software, which is trying to build a standard to operate how things are done. It is essential for everyone to know what we're up to at all times.
In a way, like you're trying to get collaboration, but also with a community, you want to define the standards because there isn't a standard, right? And one way to do that is open source code. So if they don't like something, they can contribute a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
Is it part of the calculus that also if you have kind of critical mass, then you can also influence Apple and Google Play to like modify their APIs, do stuff like that?
Yeah, that would be great. Actually, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's missing as of today, which disallows us from giving y'all a better experience, right? Like, there's just APIs are lacking. Documentation is very often lacking around a lot of this stuff. Yeah, Arnab is well aware. I don't think that's an active goal, but we hope that this does change some stuff because it's so visible that, hey, okay, these folks are trying to solve this problem here. It seems like we're not providing them enough information to make it better. We must do something about it, is hopefully an emotion or
Enough of an influence to influence big companies. Good luck.
We have comments on Google Issue Tracker around their APIs, which all these companies that we mentioned, Shopify, Etsy, every one of those people who have built a platform like this, there's a comment there saying, please fix this. All the incumbents who have come have actually gone there and written a comment, and we're like, okay, yeah, we see it. These are the people who are building this, or these are the people who have actually built a platform here.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Google hasn't done anything in this space because they've got a bunch of Android and iOS app. I don't know how many, probably like over 50 different apps.
They have their own platform internally. We know this.
Yeah, they probably have a really good platform internally.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, but why don't they externalize it as a GCP service?
And see, I think this is where one of those differences with Amazon would come in. If Amazon had produced 50 apps internally and had built a platform, I'm sure we would have seen like an AWS service about it already. Whereas Google probably likes to do excellent things, but
it's not enough to get promoted.
right. Right. They haven't seen the opportunity to like make a thing about it yet.
Or if they build it, they'll kill it after 5 years.
1 year.
Yes, that too.
But I feel like the folks who are using the developer console on Google, at the very least, upload a binary and then roll it out. I think that solves most of the use cases for most of the people, that platform. And I feel like that is enough in their heads, perhaps. I mean, this is all conjecture. It feels like this is good enough today. Of course, when we are talking about Tramline, we're talking about the 90th percentile, right? Like, we're talking about folks who are at like the top of their game, essentially, the top of the top mobile first companies.
Like us.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Exactly.
Or who's crucial, like whose business is mobile critical. Their business would stop if the mobile apps are not shipped on time.
It's kind of interesting because you need some experience and expertise to actually even realize you have this problem. Because if you take like a student doing a pet project, it's not a big deal to upload something to the web console, right? They may not even think about it. But then what we are realizing now, we are a very small startup and we save a lot of time, but also a lot of energy by not having to do all of that manual work. So actually startups probably get to benefit from this a lot. They just don't know. Maybe they don't even think about this.
I think you folks are definitely, I would use the word over-engineered in a slightly good sense. I mean, it's all good.
I told you, Arnab.
No, but you're absolutely right. Arnab, to your previous question, if there is like a Ruby on Rails version of Tramline, this is definitely something we think about pretty much every week. Breaking through the barriers of existing work that people have put in and then not necessarily swapping it, but augmenting it with a more streamlined experience is initial work, which of course we also had to spend a day together to do this. That's true. The slice that requires this to be a Ruby on Rails experience requires Tramline to be a Ruby on Rails experience, which is basically the one engineer framework, what they like to call it, which essentially means it's a full stack framework, which means they do everything from top to bottom. You're vertically integrating all the sorts of stuff that you do in a release in one single place. And that's definitely something that's on the cards, but not a high priority at the moment. But yeah, it is, I think, valuable to both enterprises. Just to draw this analogy out even further, Ruby on Rails is used by us and Ruby on Rails is used by Shopify's and the Intercoms of the world also. It works for everyone. You just have to scale it differently.
So it's been about a year now, right? And you're 3 people. Who does what? How are you like distributing, deciding who works on which sides and all that?
Akshay and I take care of all of engineering, product, and engineering-related writing, support, in fact, some amount of sales as well. Pratul takes care of sales and product as well. So right now, I think we're such a small company that it doesn't need to have very clear divisions, like you do only this and you do only that. I was actually having this conversation with Akshay yesterday. It's sort of like this week or this next 2 weeks needs to be completely focused on just this problem. So you go do that, and while I take care of everything else. The other side is like, okay, this week we don't have a lot of engineering work, so you also focus on sales, or you also focus on marketing. It is a bit of flexible roles right now. But yeah, Pratul's right. This is the kind of division we have right now.
There are some baseline roles.
That's what you need in a start.
Yeah, that window is all the engineering. This window does no engineering. That's a big difference.
But all three of you like code, all three of you do sales whenever needed, all three of you do...
No, I've barely written any code. I've done a bunch of UI work. Early on, I did a bunch of UI work.
So there are some baseline roles, I would say, sort of initial roles. And then there is some minor overlap here and there because from an engineering point of view, since both Nid and myself are there, it's slightly more engineering heavy, happens to be engineering heavy at the moment. So we tend to balance out the whole equation of the sales, marketing, engineering, support, the whole loop. It's possible that like sometimes the both of us spend more time on non-engineering work to balance out the work Pratul's putting in. But yeah, we do have some baseline responsibilities and we...
Are there weeks where like Pratul and Akshay are taking care of sales, which we have with a couple of potential customers, and I am the one only doing engineering?
Yeah.
I mean, right now I'm doing fundraising, and I've only been doing fundraising for 3 weeks now, I think.
You look exhausted, man.
Yeah, I don't think I've spoken to these many people in 3 weeks ever. I've met so many new people.
Tell us about that side of it. Like, how's the money flowing in? How did you get your first few customers? How's that all going? What are you looking to do with fundraising and all that? Yeah.
So the first few customers, we just threatened all of them. We went and threatened all our clients and effectively told them, hey, we are doing this thing and you have to listen to us.
Clients from consulting time, okay.
Yeah, clients from consulting. And all of them were like, yeah, nice, cute. Do something and we'll talk to you. And it was a very, very slow. I mean, I think personally from me, theoretically and like in all manners, understood that the early sales process is very, very slow. Like it takes a very long time. But I was still constantly surprised at how long it took. It took forever. It was such a drain. It was such a slog. And just understand. At some point, I have to write a blog post about this. Like my personal experience of understanding the meaning or like living through what the word positioning means. Like it's very easy to say, oh, your product positioning is not right. That doesn't mean anything to me. But to feel it, once you've spoken to like 100 people, like 100 different companies, and then you realize, oh, they're just not getting it. Like, what am I saying wrongly? Like, I'm not saying this the right way. So it was a challenge, of course, but I thought it was very exciting. I get excited still when someone tells me about a thing from their personal background, which theoretically I understand. Like I theoretically know enterprise sales cycles are long. I theoretically know that, these things, I've never done it, but I theoretically know this is what's going to happen. But when someone tells me a personal anecdote about something from their career, like, I meet someone and they'll tell me, yeah, 10 years ago I did this. It's very fascinating to me that, wow, it's almost identical. There is no difference in this stuff at all. It's very first principles, the way that this happened. So for us, our first users were all friends, like for everyone else. I've had a lot of friends who obviously have been mobile engineers and are mobile engineers. They're building side projects, hobby projects. Some of them are building new businesses, like you guys happen to be in that category. So those folks definitely became our earliest users. And some of those folks became early customers. They converted to customers. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think it took us 7 months to get to the first user, right? 6-7 months?
Yeah, I would say so.
So is it 7 months after you already had the product, or is it 7 months including building the product?
No, including building the product. 7 months of going from 0 to 1, where 1 is a production release. Or rather, someone made a production release to the App Store. I think it was the Play Store, actually, to the Play Store using Tramline.
It was the Play Store. That was basically our benchmark because you can do all sorts of releases to test flights in the Firebase app distribution to the world, but the serious test of the platform is shipping it to the users. And so that's where we measured the benchmark that, okay, this is how we count a release. Everything else is sub-release.
What's interesting is actually add to this is that from Jan, it took us 6 more months to get our first big enterprise customer.
Yeah.
So it took us like nearly a full year, even though we're in a market where we definitely, given that we're in Bangalore and like the three of us have done engineering in Bangalore for more than a decade. And we have access to so many of these companies even then. And we did speak to a lot of these companies. But the value to get them to understand the value and for them to agree that, yes, we will try this. Yeah, a year of work.
So if you were to say this on LinkedIn, you would say like you leveraged your robust network of previous connections cultivated during your consulting times.
It created synergy.
I will listen to this recording and I will make that LinkedIn post.
You could call this red flags or whatever you will, right? But this product is quite complicated to build. This is a non-trivial thing to ship in 2 months, which is like the general thumb rule of you ship 3 months or whatever to your first users. This was literally impossible. It would be basically a Frankenstein project if we had shipped it like that. It would be dysfunctional. And so because it's such an integration heavy sort of thing, and it requires so much domain context to do, it doesn't make sense piecemeal until a whole bunch of things come together. There is obviously, I mean, looking back, perhaps there is some stuff we could have definitely left out, but it wouldn't have gone from like 8 months to 3 months. It would have still been like 5 months or 6 months. Yeah, so you call it what you will, but I think that time elapsed was necessary. And of course, this is roughly the first time for us, right? Also trying to sell this. And so those cycles are also longer. And not just that, it's just this sort of stuff isn't out there in the wild. This isn't generative AI, and this isn't a version control system, and this isn't a Jenkins. It's an entirely new subsystem.
It sort of comes in the purview of mobile DevOps, which has become sort of famous over the last 5 years, 4 years. But again, there was nothing to compare it to, that this is like X of mobile engineering. There was no analogy we could draw when we were selling it to people. So we had to almost start from scratch. We would have to say, okay, this is how you do things now, and this is how you would do things with Tramline. And by the way, we have learned how to sell this by failing at it for so long.
I wouldn't say we've learned it yet. I think
we're starting to learn. We're starting to learn.
This is still always a moving process.
I'm saying we've learned it in the sense that we've done one sale, big sale. So in that way, I'm going to give ourselves some credit. But I think this learning process is going to continue because none of us had actually sold a software. We were always on the other end. We were always the buyers.
Actually, that's a point. Remember, we were discussing this today or yesterday that even as buyers, I don't remember ever paying $100,000 for a software.
Not this big a software, yeah.
Exactly. So the three of us have also, like both of you, like, Ilya and Arnav, like you've been at AWS and Google, and you've actually had that experience of how large companies think of buying software and using it and deploying it. So you've probably seen 6-figure contracts, 7-figure contracts over your career. We've never done that. None of us have ever seen that happen.
Or at least it's familiar to you in your vicinity, if not in direct contact.
It's a bit different, I think. In Amazon, there's a thing called NIH, not invented here. It's almost like a negative thing right now because Amazon would almost never go buy some off-the-shelf thing or pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. They would instead like take 2 years to kind of figure it out and build it internally. And eventually they'll release it as a AWS product.
But that's for like infrastructure products, right? But things like they use Exchange from Microsoft, they use Slack, I'm pretty sure some, Concur for expenses, all of that kind of non-core business stuff. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure like the Slack contract is probably in the millions, given the scale of Amazon.
I think Amazon is Slack's, if I remember, the biggest installation, because think about the number of employees Amazon has. I don't think there's any other.
I'm pretty sure Amazon is the largest employer in the world.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised, yeah.
Well, Microsoft will come close, but they would use Teams.
Yeah.
The thing you said about positioning, I think, is very interesting. My larger team at Google had this experience where they were selling Cloud Run, which is a container as a service, and they would come to customers, and customers would be like, is it like AWS Lambda or is it like AWS Fargate? And the team would be like, it's neither. And then the customers would be like, it's just hard to explain. If there is a box in their architecture and just say, okay, so you just unplug that thing, plug our thing instead, it's just so much easier. But then if you say like, oh, you unplug half of that thing, 1/3 of that thing, and also half of that thing, and then you like rewire the whole thing, it just becomes a much harder sell.
Too much changes for companies to take in all at once, yeah.
I actually wouldn't be able to tell you the difference between Lambda and Fargate itself, even though I've used both of those. Because I think a lot of those AWS products, and this is not disparaging, they have, at the surface level, fairly subtle differences. You could lump them in roughly the same category. But like when you dig in, oh, okay, actually this is a PaaS, but it's not Dockerized, or this is a PaaS, but it's not on Kubernetes or whatever, right? Like that kind of thing. But it's still in the rough category of that, but it's slightly different. This is serverless, but still for deployments, really. It gets hard to remember these subtle changes that these products have. I feel like there's one more on AWS that does this thing. That's not Fargate and that's not Lambda. It's like Heroku, but on AWS.
Oh yeah, the Open Chef, the team in Germany that ran it, Ilya.
OpsWorks.
OpsWorks, that's correct. Yeah, there's actually another one which we don't need to get into, but I think there's a few of those out there.
I think what tends to happen in AWS is also teams are very independent. So initially, Lambda and Fargate were very different products. But over the years, as they grow and get bigger, Lambda is introducing ways for you to like bring your own containers and stuff. And while Fargate is kind of getting closer and closer to the serverless thing. So I think if you were to start today, there's like, yeah, they're almost very similar things. Yeah, there are differences, but yeah.
Yeah, and Google is like in the typical Google fashion. It's like, you're all doing serverless wrong. Here's Cloud Run.
Yeah. This is the best way to run it. Yeah.
Right.
That's actually in one of our positioning conversations, which we may perhaps revive, but we're not sure. We used to call ourselves like a Heroku for mobile, which doesn't really land that well.
We call Vercel of mobile.
Vercel of mobile, I'm sorry. That's what we used to call it. Similar things.
My first analogy was Circle CI of mobile.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So how did you like during the long build process, right? And you're starting to get your first enterprise customers now. How did you fund yourselves? And what are you trying to do with raising funds and what's the next step?
So I raised right before Akshay joined. Actually, not right. Couple of months before that, I joined this accelerator program called On Deck. They have a very cool founder fellowship. It's called the On Deck Founder Fellowship. It's like a 8-week or 12-week long fellowship program for founders. They basically have programming around getting founders into groups and like discussing stuff and like, sharing their problems, etc., etc. It's almost like everyone's group therapizing each other, all these founders. And it is everyone who usually joins the On Deck Founder Fellowship program, they're all very early. So they're all usually at an idea stage. So that experience for me was super fun because I got to talk to all sorts of people who had all sorts of ideas and they were all like very excited about these ideas, but they had no idea what to do or like how to build this into a business, but they all were excited about this thing. And so that was very useful for me personally. And coincidentally, the On Deck program also that year offered some founders the option to raise money from them. So that was our pre-seed round. So I did the program. I agreed to take on their pre-seed thing, which is $125,000. And we raised that in July last year.
For what percentage of equity?
So it was standard 125K, 7%, pretty standard thing.
Oh, okay. So like the Y Combinator, the standard deal thing.
Yeah, like the older Y Combinator thing, basically. And right after that, Akshay, he's been taken a break for a bit and he came back and he joined up full-time as this thing. And then they joined us in January. Yeah, early January. So we're very careful about how we use the money. We're aware that we have taken venture funding, even if it's low friction capital. It's accelerator money, so it's pretty low friction. But we are aware of the fact that if we get onto the way that the Valley likes to call it, the VC train, then it kind of forces you to go in a certain direction at a certain pace in a certain time.
Towards a certain goal.
Yeah, exactly. Towards a certain goal. And both of you know this very well. You've been talking about this in your podcast over and over. And I don't think that venture capital is a bad idea. I think that the way Silicon Valley has done venture capital over the past 10, 20 years or whatever, post 2008 perhaps, I don't know, that has taken a lot of what could have become sustainable businesses and made them become unfortunately unsustainable, right? Because once you've taken $10, $20 million in funding, at that point you have to become like a multi-$100 million business. when so many of those businesses could have been very well run $20 million smaller businesses with a small team, and they would all be very happy. The founders would be happy, the early angels would be happy, the early investors. So I'm not against venture capital, but I think like slow venture capital, like slow VC mode is the way to do this.
Some of those businesses would not have been able to actually reach that point of sustainability without the funding. But some of those could have, but they instead chose to take the money, and then they basically shackled themselves into...
Some of those, the ones that could have, ended up in the hype cycle anyway, where they could have avoided it, perhaps.
So we're cautious about that, the three of us. Yeah, we want, slow living, slow VC mode.
What is slow VC?
I mean, it's basically what I said. Like, I'm not against the idea of venture capital. I don't think the three of us are against the idea of venture capital. It's just that be very, 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 very mindful that you're taking somebody else's money, which means that the only reason they're giving you this money is because they want to make more money off it.
10x more money.
Exactly. So you want to be very mindful of what that X is. If you end up taking $20 million when you barely have anything, how are you going to return $200 million? Like, you're going to make it somebody else's problem at some point. You're going to be like, oh, I've done 6 years doing this. I'm going to make somebody else CEO. I'm going to leave because whatever. And we've seen this like over and over again. Every month, Hacker News, somebody will write a story that this destroyed my business, or like I could have done this differently. Anyway, at the moment, we're raising a round. We like to think of it as a bridge, kind of like a middle ground before we get to the point where we decide if we want to raise seed. We're very consciously avoiding venture capital, like basically avoiding VC funds in this round. And we're only raising from angels.
So are you like looking for smaller angels? Okay.
Yes. Only from angels. Engineering leaders who have experience in DevOps platforms, or people who've spent a lot of time at very large mobile first companies, right? So some of those, a lot of the angels right now are people who have experiences like that. And so, of course, they're also looking for a return. I mean, I'm not saying they're not looking for money, but their individual capital is very limited. And the reason that they're investing in us is because they really enjoy us as a team. So they know us personally and they just want to support someone who they know is doing something. Or they truly believe that this problem is real and they want to, try and help us. Like some of our angels have been very, very proactive about offering support. That, close this round out and then let's talk late October, early November. And I want to understand how I can help you shape your US GTM journey, for example. And that helps. That's the kind of support that you want. It's very specific. It's very focused because these angels aren't saying that I'll do this. They're like, yeah, I've done this for 10 years really well. And I can help you do this thing really well. And I really like what you're doing. It's nice.
So how are you going about finding these angels? Is it the same like robust, what did I say earlier? Like leveraging your robust network of...
Correct. I'm leveraging by a robust network of professional connections and then asking them to leverage their more robust networks.
So you're like directly reaching out to people one-on-one, and are you looking at angel networks and things like that, or you're doing like literally one-to-one reaching out to people?
I have looked at some angel networks where I knew an angel personally. So some of those have happened. The first set of I think 50 people, 30 people that I reached out to, I knew everyone personally. And then some of them who agreed and then some of them who didn't agree because of whatever reason, they ended up connecting us to other people. And now this happens on a daily basis. On a daily basis, somebody will say yes or no. And they're like, you know what, you should also talk to this person. And this person is really good at this.
What amounts are you talking about at this stage, like per person?
Per angel, kind of.
It's like 10 to 50K. Is usually the check size here. 10 to 50K.
But you're also not just looking for that, but you're looking for people who are established in this space who can advise you on it.
Yeah, some alignment. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we've spoken to anyone completely.
Yeah, that's I guess the value of going through the robust network. I mean, you'll end up finding folks who've kind of done this. And I think the folks who haven't generally just tend to kind of say no anyway, or they're too far away from the problem. They'll be like, I can't form a thesis on this or whatever, right? I can perhaps connect you to folks who have, and then that's how the network grows. So it kind of serendipitously ends up. It's not that we're actively looking out for the folks. It's just by design, it happens to be that way.
How do you structure the deal, all the paperwork? By the way, where are you guys incorporated to begin with?
Oh, it's Delaware. We're a Delaware C Corp. And this round is an AngelList RUV. It's a roll-up vehicle, which is a really fun product that AngelList has. If you're not aware of it, an RUV is still a safe note, like you're raising on a safe note. But what it does is AngelList will create a special purpose vehicle, and everyone who invests money, they all become founders or whatever, shareholders in that SPV. And then that SPV itself, that roll-up vehicle itself, is just one line item on your cap table. So it maintains a very clean cap table instead of having all of these people who have like little amounts. So, and investing in an RUV itself is also super easy. Like AngelList has really made the process butter smooth. And that's what we're doing, raising using an AngelList RUV.
So basically, if you find a friend, then you just send them to AngelList to put the money there.
Yes, yeah. We just send them a link and AngelList just guides them through the process. AngelList will give them all the details they need, like, because I've given them details of our previous round and all of that, and I've linked to the deck and like risks and disclosures, standard stuff. But it's a very neat platform.
And how about like board seats and all that?
None of that exists in an RUV. It's none of that matters. That's what happens when you end up taking a direct investment.
Get to VC.
Yeah, even a micro fund which will want to cut like a 100K check or like a 200K check, they will start to make a little noises about that. Like we want preferential shares, or like we want, how about like, can we change this, amend this thing? In an RUV, when they're angels, it's literally a duplicate of the Y Combinator safe document on ycombinator.com. They're like, I know that it doesn't matter.
And it's at the same percentage, the same kind of deal percentages based on the amount that they're putting in.
Yes.
Okay. And what are you planning to do? Like, what's the future for Tramline? What are you planning to do with these funds?
I mean, we have a whole bunch of experiments that lined up. Some are experiments, some are we're mostly convinced are features worth building. There is obviously the default catch-up that Tramline has to play, which is to be open for as many people as possible, which is trying more integrations in on a consistent basis as people need them. So we have a certain lot today, but a few other clients would come around tomorrow and they will need a certain other lot of integrations. So that process is forever ongoing. Obviously, it'll reach point of closure when the most important ones have reached our system, because there's only so much diversity in the integrations that we play with. So perhaps it's like a couple, and now it might become like 6 in the next year or so. That's about it. It'll probably stop there. This is sort of a thing that Tramline is inherently has as a platform, which is integrations. But there's, of course, a lot of other stuff that it can do to make it more Ruby on Rails-esque, if we want to call it like that. There is, of course, the part where we build your apps as well. And I think, Arnav, we've also spoken about this before.
So to be clear, right now, when you use Tramline, it's basically the run book for building and deploying and releasing your app, but the actual build is happening somewhere else, like in GitHub, or in our case, we use Bitrise for actually building it in a container. So you want to provide like a mechanism which will make it even smoother, I think, the UX, because as we were figuring out, there's so many moving parts, certificates and all that to pass around.
There is a level after which you can't really do anything. Again, the platform sort of is, at the end of the day, for shipping mobile apps to the stores from the Googles and the Apples. So you have to abide by their rules and you have to abide by their APIs. So we're restricted by that, but definitely having a lot of those baked into the platform is a huge load off people's chest, right? Like trying to integrate stuff in other places and then integrating back here. It's a much simpler experience overall. That's kind of like the distribution or the building part of things, the CI/CD part of things, let's call it.
We have a bunch of stuff on sales. One of our big plans is also to actively start focusing on the US and Europe market. Right now, it's a focus, obviously because of the geography we're based in, has been India, Southeast Asia. But also with this raise, we're going to actively start looking at North America and Europe as well.
Yeah.
And I think finally we'll try to wrap it up quickly, but it would be a crime to let you all go without talking about like the dev agency stuff, because all three of you worked in some of the best boutique consulting dev agencies in India. Tell us a bit about how that goes. Where do you see startups looking to use dev agencies? How do they go about selecting them and all that?
This is really funny because I think once a week somebody asks me this. Still, it's been 2.5 years after moving out of an agency business. I'm still approached once a week by somebody that, hey, I have this idea and I want to build this app which will do this and that and that. So what should I do? Who should I talk to? And it's an issue because most people don't really have the kind of budgets to afford, a good agency. And a good agency in India, even in India, will cost you $60 an hour minimum. And of course, going up to probably 100. And the vast majority of the people don't know how to even find these agencies. I think that's a very big challenge because these agencies are getting their work from word of mouth, so they don't bother much with advertising themselves anyway. So the bigger challenge that I see with startups is how do you sift through the $20 an hour work or the $30 an hour work, which is almost all of the work that all of the kind of agencies that you see, and figure out who to pick there. That is quite a challenge. And I've actually helped a couple of folks who I've met and friends who are doing something new in helping them do this. And usually I tell them that, if you like the leadership team, if you think that the founders or the team that is running, the team that you're working with, the leads or the whoever is running this team, if you like them and if you think they like your idea, at least that will be okay. But if you think that, when you're talking to them and they're like, yeah, whatever, we'll build everything. Yeah, you want this? Yeah, absolutely. At that point, I see that as a very big red flag. You want, a mass market agency at a low price point, you want them to care a little. And you're not going to get the best work, and they know they can't produce best work. That's fine. Everyone already knows that. No one needs to speak that out loud. My advice to most people is that if you meet an agency where you felt like this person I was talking to, this team lead, they cared about what I was building, I think that's good enough. Just go ahead.
What kind of projects do you think it works really well in? Would you say this is for design? Essentially, you're outsourcing some parts of it, right? How about developing your core application itself? Is that something?
I mean, that is something that we have done, all three of us have done, right? Building someone else's core, whether that was back-end or front-end, core business application. And you get a consultancy usually, or you get someone with an expertise. They don't just build this thing for you. That's how we have usually done. They'll teach people in your team and they'll mentor people in your team on how to build good software and how to scale a software at this level. And that's what you want to look for a little bit. Not just someone who will come build this and just leave, but also someone who will come mentor your team and who will build your team a little bit for you. Because yes, they won't be around forever. That's the thing. Both Obvious and Lenso did 1 year, 2 year contracts. It was not a 3 months contract ever. They were all long-term contracts. But what the most of the time spent there was not just building the product, but also building the team. I remember from early days at Gojek, the entire Lenso team helped build their Clojure expertise, which was basically the central allocation service that did allocating of drivers to all their bookings. There was one central service that did that. That was written in Clojure, and we didn't just build the service, but build the entire team around it. And now the team grew into a 30% person team and still going strong. So that is kind of what you would want to look for. It is not about solving one particular problem. You won't probably get someone to solve, because you are the domain experts. You won't actually get someone to solve a particular domain problem. As a customer, you are the domain expert. You won't find someone's come solve this logistics problem for me. You have to gain your own expertise in that domain. What you would get, but is people who know how to build and scale software at the scale that you are at and help your team. Because most of these startups or most of these companies, even if they're not startups, they have a very young team. And it's hard for them to hire senior engineers.
That's actually one of the big reasons why a lot of the times, at least Nilanso got hired, is just to get experienced talent in play.
Bootstrapping their own companies, yeah.
Bootstrapping their own, yeah, pretty much. Because a lot of these companies kind of hire en masse and a bunch of junior folks at the same time. Now, what do you do with them? You don't have enough people to train them, or not just train in sort of a boot campy way, but show them the ways of how a product is developed, or an engineering artifact is shipped. But again, I think the bare minimum quality is actually just track record. It's as simple as that. As with anything, right? If you've done this before, you're probably going to be good. If you've done this before, well, and that's not very hard to find out. Of course, as Pratul said, we've never really marketed ourselves because we've never needed to. Because the demand has always been in surplus against what we can actually supply to the folks coming into us. A lot of the time, it was about rejection and not.
Yeah, it was about they want to hire someone. Is their team willing to get someone in? Is not just the CTO who's deciding that they need an expertise, but is the team actually willing to like make the change, because one person deciding, or maybe even if it is a leader deciding that the engineering process or the engineering culture needs to change, doesn't really affect it unless the team is involved.
There is a very similar conversation that I was having with another friend of mine recently, and we were just talking about, I don't know if this was true a decade ago, roughly when we all started. This was perhaps more so true before that, but what we've realized lately is that there is definitely a shortage of agencies lately who perform sort of very high level in areas that are hard to do. So a lot of sort of like this low latency, high throughput work. Those are hard computer science problems to solve.
Pipelines.
Data pipeline work, large swaths of data handling, stuff like that. There's very few folks, at least from our purview, I might be wrong on this and I don't have enough data on this, but just looking back 10 years, the folks who are around, looking at folks around now, I see a general lack of this. And perhaps that's because it is a talent that requires more skill and hence it's harder to do. But I also think a lot of those folks who could have done this have just been swept up by the FANGs of the world, the big companies of the world.
Or they just get tired of it.
Also that, yeah.
That's also true.
Or they just retire.
They also retire, yeah. I don't know if it's sad, but it's an opportunity, if anything. But of course, you have to buy into that sort of business building, which is kind of linear.
And slow. Takes time.
Okay, so I think we're well over what we had initially told you we'll record for. So let's wrap this up. What's a book or a podcast that you're listening to recently, or something you would recommend?
Very weirdly, I just finished reading this, so it's top of mind. I have a terrible fear of flying. My fear of flying is so bad that I recently made a trip to Ranchi and I fainted on the way down and then I had to take a train back. It was so bad.
I remember because you and I were going to meet for something, and then you said, I'm sorry, I can't meet today. And I was like, yeah, totally cool. And then later on, we were talking, you said, like, I fainted on a flight and I'm stuck in Ranchi.
It was not great. I mean, yeah, I've tried a bunch of things, it doesn't work. What has been really not eye-opening, because I think these arguments that people make about flying, I know them all factually, right? Like, it's all obvious. But it's just the lens in which it was presented. This is a book called The Easy Way of Flying by the guy who wrote the book to quit smoking, which is Alan Carr. It's quite a popular book at this point, but I think the flying book isn't that popular because FOF isn't that big of an affliction as cigarette smoking is. That book has a fantastic lens that, as you're about to read it, feels like it's easily challengeable by the person who is already afraid of flying, but by the end of it, it's impossible to challenge it. So that lens shift was quite fascinating to me. And it helped, I think, quite a lot.
When are you taking your next flight?
I'm taking it very soon. And I'm all ready for it. So I get afraid like weeks in advance, right? And not this time.
Good luck to that next flight, yeah. Yeah, Ned, Pratul, yeah, go ahead.
I have actually not read anything in a while. Like, what I was reading last was The Memory Police by, I forget her name.
Yoko Okazawa, I think.
Yeah, the famous. I mean, I wanted to read some Japanese authors, and I like sci-fi, so I was reading Memory Police, and I really enjoyed like the very almost poetic way of the stories written. I really enjoy that kind. It's a very, I'm not gonna say Murakami-esque, but it sort of touches that. It's not as dark, but yeah, that is what I was reading last, and I really enjoyed it.
And you have been learning Japanese, or both of you have been learning Japanese for a while now,
Well,
right?
you follow me on Duolingo, so you know that I was learning that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what language you do. I just see like progress updates and all, yeah.
I mean, we haven't officially cleared the N5. There's like a leveling system in Japanese, but I
JLPT.
think we're roughly around that level.
You'll be like ready to fly to Japan and know Japanese at the same time.
I think we can buy bread and milk pretty easily and rent a flat out, yeah.
I mean, you're done. That's all one needs. You need a house and bread and milk.
And your computer, yeah.
Yeah.
And internet, of course. And yeah, Pratul.
I've actually been reading this fantastic fiction series called The Locked Tomb by this author called Tamsin Muir. It's a trilogy, and I mean, I've read a lot of science fiction and fantasy, But this is unlike anything else I've ever read. It's incredible. It's the front page of the book, the blurb just says lesbian necromancers in space. That's it.
Okay.
And the book is so incredibly well written. Like, it is nothing. I think this is one of those books that is going to definitely go down as, if you enjoy fantasy, you have to read this. It's super, super fun to read. I'm about finishing the trilogy.
All right.
And podcast, we listen to Metacast.
Okay. Great. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's true. I have actually, every once in a while on LinkedIn, it'll pop up and I'm like, oh.
I have also been listening, yeah. I know this is a super popular thing, but I did finally give the Huberman Lab a shot. And I kind of got engrossed into it for a while, for many months actually. And I would like listen through the whole, they're really long and really like almost tiring, right? Because it's just logorrhea, right? Like it's just a bunch of words being thrown at you constantly for 4 hours. It was a bit tiring.
Also, words they don't know. That's important.
But most of the words you don't know. So it's very dense. I did read a bunch of criticisms on his techniques in which he parses, because a lot of it is him parsing papers and sort of making them accessible. It's basically just a giant, like, I will read 20 white papers this week and I will condense them down into a 4-hour podcast. That's essentially what I think he does.
It's like papers we love in podcasts.
It's papers we love in podcasts from a single person. But I've been reading a lot of criticism about how he parses them. And there are some discrepancies in the outcomes derived from it. So, like, I started to hold back a little bit because of those. Not that most of what he's doing is that. I think there are some holes here and there, which is expected. I mean, you can't read 1,000 papers in a few months and expect not to have any errors. I was consuming that quite intensely for many months, like a lot of it. Blew my brains out.
I've only tried one of his episodes where he like talks about stuff. I think it was something about dopamines. After 20 minutes, I'm like, I don't understand. I'm just losing track of it. It's like it's just too dense. But his interviews are actually pretty good. Like his interview with Mark Andreessen was really, really good. But Mark Andreessen also, he speaks at like, I don't know what the normal rate of speech is, but he speaks 3 times that.
It's impossible to parse him. I recently just downloaded a book by another person he interviewed. His name is Peter Attia. He's like, I think he's a doctor who just kind of generally talks about like muscle building and health type stuff. And that interview I found was quite interesting. It had a lot of weird correlations that he drew from it, which you wouldn't really draw naturally. There is a very strong correlation, for example, between grip strength and longevity. It doesn't compute, right, when you first hear about it, but there's like good data to back it up. So yeah, the stuff like that's interesting.
Right. Okay, it was wonderful to have you all. Finally, like, tell us where people can find you and where they can find Tramline.
Twitter and LinkedIn and tramline.app.
What are your handles on Twitter and LinkedIn? And
My handle on Twitter is PRXTL. And on LinkedIn, you can find me by my full name, Pratul Kalia. Tramline is actually Tramline HQ on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm Nid90 everywhere.
I am, it's a little hard to pronounce. I guess this settles it now, right? My nickname is pronounced as Kitalis. It's not Kaitalis or something else. It's Kitalis. It's Kitallis. I'm pretty much that everywhere on the internet.
What's the origin of that nickname?
Oh,
That's another podcast.
yeah, it's a podcast episode.
Yeah. It's not great. It's like 80% cringe and 20% interesting, I think.
You'll have to do it like in 30 seconds. We can't leave you with that.
This opens us up to another, like, an episode, hopefully in the future, where we start off with this origin story.
great. Yeah, it was awesome having you.
Thanks, folks.